Hello and welcome to the Men of Action. This podcast is developing to helping men become the best versions of themselves, learning how to unleash that warrior inside them. Men who may have felt like a zero until they recognized they had that hero inside them all along. They just need just a little bit of help to pull it out. And to do that, I got a special guest today. I got Steve. He is a father of four, been married for over 30 years, a certified coach in health and wellness, and more importantly, and something that's incredible, he's also a hospice nurse. So, Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Yeah. So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. So I am currently 53. And as you mentioned, I've been married to my lovely wife, Chrissy, for 30 years. We have four amazing children. They are 25, 27, 28, and 29. So they're all in their 20s right now. Life is a lot easier now that they're in their 20s than when they were all toddlers and in diapers at home at the same time. So it's been quite a journey. And as you mentioned, I'm a hospice nurse right now. I'm traveling as a hospice nurse. I've been doing hospice for over 10 years. I don't know if you can tell the background, the silver here. I'm in an Airstream. We're in our RV in Tucson, Arizona. We've been here for about 6 months doing travel work. So that's and as you mentioned, I'm a certified coach, just kind of breaking into that space. Been doing nursing for working in healthcare for almost 30 years as well in various capacities, and we can maybe get into that later. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, what made you decide to kind of travel? So did you like sell your house and just got an RV and like, hey, let's start traveling, let's see the world? Or
well, the short answer is yes, but it is not that simple, not even close. We've had a dream to travel since our kids were younger. We actually, my wife and I, we actually wanted to be missionaries when we first got married. And then we decided to move forward with having a family pretty quick, and felt like now's not the time to pursue that. So we kind of put that on the back burner. We have done mission trips and done stuff like that. But interestingly, on a side note, my two daughters, they're full-time missionaries now. So sometimes the dreams that are in your heart may not be for you to be the first one to fulfill. Maybe they're for you to plant in someone else. Not to say that we won't do that, but that dream of traveling has been deeply rooted in us. And once our kids were out of the house, we decided to kind of move in that direction. I found a job locally, which was a local travel job. Mm-hmm. So we were living in our house, and I got a job as a nurse with a travel company from New York. So it was kind of neat to interact with travel nurses and see what it was like, and learn that there's actual hospice travel nurses, and we decided to move in that direction. So yes, we did sell our house. We are in between homes right now. We've been living here in the RV for about 6 months. It's been good. It's been challenging. One of the neat things about living in a space this small is you can recognize that everything's really relative. You know, when we had all 4 kids at home, our home in Ohio was, including our finished basement, about 4,500 square feet. So it was a big house, big house. And as they started to move out and we moved on to another home, it went down to like 1,300 square feet. Still,
that's a big jump too.
Yeah, not bad, not a bad jump. Now we're in about 200 square feet. So we joke about it now, but you know, obviously that feels tight at times. But again, it's relative. And one of the ways we've kind of mitigated that is we'll go camping in a 2-person tent.
Okay.
And when we get back to the Airstream, it feels huge.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
and it has all the amenities of home. So.
Oh, I can't imagine just living in a small space like that.
Yeah, it has its challenges, but it also has a purpose. We're looking to purchase a property, and we're going to be able to do that with the cash that we got from the sale of our other home. So, um, and we'll use that as a home base and travel for the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Travel nursing pays decent, so I think it will be an advantage to us financially as well
Oh,
um,
sure.
to be doing this.
So what got you into it's a good kind of segment, but what got you into the healthcare field? I mean, I love the field. I mean, to have the opportunity to serve others,
Hmm.
especially when you're talking about the end of life and quite honestly, one of the toughest stages that anyone has to go through.
Hmm. Um, I am. I was a reluctant nurse.
Okay.
Yeah, to be very candid, I hated nursing for a long time,
Oh,
and, and I'll tell you why I got into it. So when
yeah.
we first got married, my wife and I had agreed that when kids come along, I'm going to do whatever it takes for her to be able to stay home and raise our kids. So I had been working in a hospital doing laundry service and transporting patients, real total bottom of
Mhm.
the ladder kind of stuff. Um, and I had gone to college for ministry. I took a year off between my sophomore and junior year, and uh, I knew someone as a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, and they
Mhm.
said the program's short and you can make decent money. So I decided to take the course and become certified as a certified nurse's aide.
Right.
Um, that's when I learned I didn't like it. And so after that, I went back to college, and every time I talked to somebody about that course, I'd say the biggest thing I learned was I never want to do that kind of work in my life.
Mm.
It broke the personal barriers between. I was used to some distance. I talk about getting up close and personal, giving people
Right.
baths and wiping them after going to the bathroom in their diaper. It's like that was too much for me as a 20-year-old kid.
Oh, sure.
Um, but when my wife got pregnant with my daughter, uh, she was a teacher, and we decided that I was going to be the breadwinner, and she would stay home.
Mhm.
Um, that's when I really had to wrestle with, am I going to man up and do what I need to do? Because I knew what I needed to do to earn the income for our family, and
Right.
that was take on a job that I hated. Um,
It's a big sacrifice.
it, but once that internal shift happened, it was still a struggle for sure. But that initial, I'm going to do whatever it takes for my family to be fed.
Mhm.
Um, I ended up being a CNA for 10 years as our kids were little. Um, Worked full time doing that. I got really good at it. And as I got into it, got good at it, it wasn't as bad. Met some really fantastic people, learned a ton of stuff. And from there, I transitioned into uh, being an RN. Um,
Mm.
uh, did some time in a, did some time. Uh, I worked as a geriatric psych nurse for a while and in nursing
Oh my god.
homes. Yeah. Skilled nursing facilities. Uh, and I went that route because the typical route, medical, surgical in the hospital requires rotating shifts. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be away from my kids at their bedtime. It was always family first in how I kind of navigated things forward. So that kind of helped the kind of nursing that it helped me decide what kind of nursing I was doing. Um, and it was at one of the nursing home jobs that I talked to the hospice that was there, and they knew me, and I knew I didn't really know what she did, and she said, "You'd be really good at it. I know I'm being recruited for this job. How about I give them your name?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah." And that kind of got me into hospice.
Okay.
Being in a nursing home, you work with people who are at the end of life, but that's not the whole clientele.
Right.
So, um, yeah, I had a background that fit, and Uh, I ended up doing that for 10 years. And it was a much, much better fit that finally, after so many years, I kind of found my stride in the nursing field. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, so that's kind of the long answer to your question on how I got there.
No,
Um,
but it's such an important question though that does take time to describe. Going from a job you hated and then not just that, but having to wait time to find something you enjoyed,
mhm.
especially in our society that a lot of people just want instant gratification. They want to have like the best job, everything be pristine like right now.
Yeah.
And to take that time to not just grit through the job per se, but to sacrifice for your family. Well, you really had to think very critically about what is the job description, what's the details, what is involved. You knew they didn't want to do rotations, and that's what's really hard about the medical field. That
Yeah.
well, like 90% it's gonna be some form of rotation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a
for
big
you to
deal.
figure out that hospice is not that way, that's incredible.
Mhm.
Um, so what does it entail to be like a traveling hospice nurse? What's like
Mhm.
a typical day for you?
Um, so typical travel nurse contract will last about 13 weeks.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that from start to finish, it's usually 13 weeks. I re-upped here in Tucson. That's why I was here for 6 months. So that,
Mhm.
you know, um, but you kind of fill in the gaps. So typically in hospice, there are what are called case managers, and those
Mhm.
are the RNs who visit the patients on a weekly basis. That may be in their home, it may be in a nursing home, wherever the patient resides. These are the nurses who are visiting at the bedside, checking vital signs, making adjustments to be sure that they're comfortable. And
Mhm.
um, so, what a typical there really isn't a typical day.
Sure.
It would be maybe a more typical week. I
Okay,
have,
we'll go with that then.
yeah, so between 10 and 18 patients that I have to visit in a given week. Um, Most of the time, we've kind of established a routine. So Monday, I visit these 5 patients. Tuesday, I visit these patients, and it's pretty routine that way, ideally. But things come up. So if uh, someone is getting close to dying, um,
Mhm.
then we visit on a daily basis. And so I may be seeing that patient every day. If there are symptoms that are out of control, then we're going to be talking to the doctor and getting them the medications they need to be comfortable. Um, so there's that medical piece, but there's also, one of the things about hospice is you're there to help a patient in a specific medical situation, the dying process. But they're not the only ones who are suffering. Anyone who cares for the patient, yeah, anyone who cares for the patient's also going through something. So we're there to help support the family as well, and uh, kind of guide them through what is this process involved. Um, Once a week, we or every other week, we meet as a team. So there's a social worker involved, chaplain, there's home health aides, and we every other week meet as a group to kind of get on the same page and talk about each patient, and verify that the plan we have in place is appropriate.
Yeah, very multidisciplinary.
Very much, yeah.
Just honestly the best form of care. I mean, from all the research studies I've done and everything, I wish more things were like that. Getting everyone on board to really look at a patient, a
Hmm.
consumer, someone who needs help to really make sure that almost everything's being done possibly that you can to really devote that kind of time for them.
Yep, yep, yeah. Hospice is definitely multidisciplinary. Um, it's very good that way.
That's awesome. So, what are some like kind of and this shit on the podcast we really focus on like men becoming like
Hmm.
action
Hmm.
takers and sometimes as men sometimes we're more bark than bite. We'll speak a lot but we don't take much action. So where have you kind of like in the pinnacle of your life really noticed like where you really had to take action? You can't just like do a lot of the talking, like you had to show it.
Hmm. Well, that's there's been like a lot of different
Mhm.
opportunities that way, but kind of thinking about that question is one of the things that comes right up to the top is what I already mentioned when my, that struggle that I had doing what I have to do to feed my family, even if it is what I don't want to do. Um, that was my daughter's 29, so it was a different world in some ways back then. There's a lot more opportunity now than there was then as far as online stuff.
Mhm.
Um, it's like this is way pre. So I mean, it's not just there was no Facebook. The internet was
Just coming
uh,
out, really. I mean,
yeah, AOL dial up, and there was nothing on there except it's like every time I hear that tone, the I know what that yeah that was after my kids were born. It's like
right.
um but but that call as a man and as a husband and as a father to step up and do what you have to do for the sake of your family, um that may look different nowadays than it did for me.
Mhm.
That there are other ways besides being a CNA. The path I took was the path that was in front of me. It may not be anything uh, in front of any of these. The audience listeners may have completely different contexts, but that idea of stepping up and doing what you got to do, even if you don't want to, uh, that plays out in so many different arenas and different contexts. Um, yeah, so that's what comes to mind right away
No,
when you
that's
ask
I
that
think that's a
question.
great answer.
Um,
So how'd you do that for, like, the 10 years? Like, how'd you just go through, like, what helped you to get through it? Maybe that'd be better, better questions, like, what really helped you get through those 10 years then?
that's a good question, and uh, for me, a lot of it was faith. Um,
Okay.
it was a yeah, it was faith, um, and so when I started in as a CNA, I was bivocational as a pastor as well.
Mhm.
So the schooling I had gone to was for ministry, and I had launched into uh, starting a church while I was a CNA.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, so I was working full time as a CNA and launching this church. Um, we did that for 5 years, 5 out of the 10,
Mhm.
and we ended up having to close it down. It didn't quite succeed, um, but that was that's kind of another track from what your question was, which is what
That's okay.
sustained me through that. But it really was that desire to have a good character, um, and I distinctly remember walking onto the unit at the nursing home where I worked, and actually, let me rewind just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
Take your
how
time.
I got the first CNA job I got, um, I never should have gotten it. I wasn't qualified.
Okay.
I had the certification, but I didn't have the experience. And so this nurse manager was looking to hire a guy CNA, which was very rare 30 years
Yeah.
ago. Um, and they had a patient who was he was a former, he may have been a Marine, but he was paralyzed on one side, uh, had skin problems, and he would be verbally and physically abusive to all the girls. So
Okay.
she was desperate to find a CNA who could care for him that was a guy and help prevent the abuse from her other staff onto her other staff. So
Right.
that's how I ended up getting my first CNA job, is because I was a guy. Um, I was not good. She was very patient with me, helping me learn, and it was during that season that I recall walking onto the unit. And there's a scripture in Psalms where I think it's David who prays, um, you enable me to bend a bow of bronze. And
Oh.
I was thinking, a bow of bronze is not normal. That seems like it would be really hard to pull. And that's kind of what this job feels like to me. Really, it's really hard. But God, you helped David pull this bow of bronze. You helped me to do this job and do it excellently. And just that persistence and that faith that God was going to help me do this. I had a real confidence that I was where I belonged, and and that so that helped me. But that helped me through for many years too, because a lot of what I was doing was like I'm jumping ahead in the story, but once when the church closed, we that's when I decided to go to nursing school and become an RN.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then, but even still, there was an inner struggle. Like, part of it was the mindset that I brought with me to the table. I look back at myself in my 20s, and I think, man, was my head in the wrong place in many ways. It's like, uh, and I had confidence that God was working in me through these difficult circumstances. I remember later on in a nursing home, I felt like I wasn't made for this. It's like, I'm taking care of these 40 patients. I'm getting blisters on my thumb, pushing pills. That's all I was doing, was pushing pills, and it was
Oh,
not
okay.
satisfying. It wasn't, uh, it, and it was a very high bar nursing home. So, I mean, if you did everything right, that wasn't really good enough. You needed to do better. So it was
Oh
a
my
tough,
God.
yeah, it was a tough culture to work in. But and I remember walking down the hall there in that nursing home on one of the units, and it's like, God, get me out of here. And I felt like He responded to me, and in a way that was kind of like, do you want me to take the cake out half baked? It's like, oh, I know what you're talking about there.
Oh,
So I guess not. Yeah, I'm here for a purpose, and certainly it's to serve people and to be a light, and help folks that need help in this
mhm.
context. But I'm also in a crucible that's shaping me, and I look back on those years at that particular place, and really did shape me, um, in some good ways. That's where I connected with the hospice nurse, was at that same nursing home. Yeah.
So that's really the center point of where it leads you. It's funny, we don't see that like in any journey, we don't recognize them when we're in the moment.
Right.
It's only when we're at the next destination do we actually look back like, oh, so that's how the dots connected and that's how we
Yep.
got here.
Yep. Yep. That's true.
And it's,
Yeah.
and that's for me, that's always been a tough thing, when you recognize that sometimes you're not good enough, and which
Mhm.
downplays a lot of guys
Yeah.
because guys
Yep.
have a hard time with that. And then when you're doing everything, I mean, you're doing that job description, you're showing on time, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And let's be honest, if you're in a hospital setting, any type of setting, it's remarkable one that you actually got through your day and just to do everything that needed to be happen, especially all the distractions in the day. And you're just like, okay, that happened. Okay, now I gotta, adjust this and then get this done.
Yep.
And to be told to your face, like, oh, you're just doing average work, you're doing what's expected. I mean, I've been in that situation personally, and it's almost like a slap to your face, like, why go the extra
Yep.
mile then? And will I
Yep.
ever be good enough for you?
Yep.
And
Yep. Yeah. That's a tough situation, because sometimes the shoe doesn't fit, and
mhm,
they're saying that because it's their issue.
right.
Um, but that's one of the mindsets that I had to learn along the way. And I've heard some folks articulate it super good more recently, particularly Jocko Willink with his extreme ownership.
Oh,
And
yeah.
um, there's the guy who does impact theory. He has a T-shirt that says "Everything is my fault."
I don't know about that one. I've heard of it, but I've never looked into it.
I'm having a hard time dialing up his name for some reason, but yeah, that mindset of ownership is something that was hard earned for me, and it was through situations like that, like uh, where the having a standard so high that nobody can meet it. Well, uh, that seemed like what the situation was in that nursing home. It's like that nobody can meet the standard,
Right.
um, but at the same time striving to meet that standard,
Mm.
um, and making the adjustments I needed to, and um, because I wanted to be excellent and do what's right, and not so much to toe the line and please people, but to uh, uh, just be the best that I could be. And yeah, that was a hard earned lesson for me, and it's one that took many many iterations to really sink in.
It's a good way
Yeah,
to put it.
yeah, and having come through situations like that, I have a lot of confidence in life as a teacher,
Mm.
um, and that's one of the ways my wife and I kind of raised our kids. Is there's consequences to being certain ways, and
Mm.
we'll tell you about that. And if you decide not to listen to that, you're going to experience those consequences, and that's going to teach you better than I could have ever taught you. Um, it's like shielding kids from the consequences of their actions is detrimental to them because it's
I,
not reality. It's not reality. Um,
it's true. Yeah, I remember having a lot of conversations with my own father about different things. If I would take different routes, whether it's interacting, most of it was like either at an internship or a job or a class or something like that, where
mhm,
it's like, if I did something, it's like, well, you kind of knew that this was going to happen. You kind of know their mindsets and everything. It's like, yeah, I don't know why I thought it was going to be different this time. It's not. Just so you just
yeah.
always have to learn and grow. And
Mhm, mhm,
one thing that's one of the hardest lessons to really learn is that failure isn't necessarily a bad thing, and it's actually a great learning opportunity. Because
mhm,
I one of my family members actually taught me this is that they learn more from their failures than their successes
mhm,
because they learned
mhm.
what not to do. And that
Yes.
has been such a powerful lesson that has really stuck with me all these years of, yeah, it is right now. I know what not to do and I know how to make things better. And, you almost like you
Mhm,
have to fail to learn. And I wish schools and just were given permission to allow kids just to make mistakes and learn from it.
mhm,
As someone who
mhm,
used to work in the schools, it's hard for a kid to make, to be,
mm, yeah.
kind of that robot where they have to sit there, do everything right. It can't be a disruption. And the schools held, you know, they're really bound up too. So it's the schools, they have
Yeah.
their own restrictions. I know it's a later, another, conversation for another day. So it really does seem like you have that, like that heart of a teacher, that really that servant's heart that wants to put other people first. That heart that wants to take care of other people, put others before yourself. So how did this now lead you to, I know that you're a certified coach, so how did that lead to that?
Mhm. That's a great question. Um, so with the travel, there's a lot of different factors that I guess played into me moving in that direction.
Mhm.
Um, I'll see how many I can think of, but working in a nursing home, working in hospice, I encounter folks um, who have had to endure a lot of suffering. And one of the really sad things that became very obvious to me was that a lot of that suffering, not all of it, but a lot of it, maybe most of it, is because of people's lifestyles.
Mm.
The chronic illness that catches up with people in their 70s and 80s is where they were pointed at when they were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's like, that living in a certain way, eating in a certain way, um, you know, using substances in certain ways, it wears people down and opens doors for diseases. And
Right.
um, so that having that viewpoint um, encouraged me in the health to move toward health and wellness coaching, because I could help people further upstream than toward the very end, where you're pretty much just managing symptoms, and you're not going to heal or cure anybody, at that point in the game.
Mm.
But you can prevent many of such things from developing if you attend to a healthy lifestyle earlier on. Um, so that was one factor. Another is the having gone to school for ministry and worked as a pastor for many years. And I've been involved in churches in through the years in various capacities. And that teaching is rooted in that as well, that desire to teach and help people. Um, and one of my favorite ways of doing that is one-on-one. So that feeds into the coaching aspect as well, moving toward that. And a third thing that I'll mention finally is the idea of traveling that we've already
Mhm.
talked about with doing this travel nurse job is giving us the opportunity to do that. Um, but if I could develop, or when I develop a coaching practice that I can do remotely, then I wouldn't necessarily have to be in a place for 3 months or
Right.
6 months. So that's kind of where I'm aiming at, is to develop a practice that I can take anywhere and work with folks, and at the same time be able to travel and be wherever my wife and I desire to go. Yeah.
Man, just have that freedom just to travel and move. That's got to be the most exciting about, what makes this decade so exciting is that there's so much more
Hmm.
flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I have over the years put some really good tools in my toolbox that as much as I get paid as a travel nurse for the value that I give, I feel like if moving into the coaching space, I'll actually be able to give more value
Mm.
um, to folks over the long term, and I'm excited about that. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, to look at that, that impact that you can bring, especially with how much your expertise has taught you over the, 2 decades you've been doing this.
The health part is just part of it, though. The
Right.
health and wellness certification. I had thought about doing life coaching.
Mhm.
Um, but that always felt a little too fuzzy for me. It's like, what exactly? I mean, life is a huge domain. A coach
Right.
for life is, but at the same time, what I feel like I bring to the table is related to health. It's also related to family. It's related to
Mhm.
marriage. It's related to spirituality and faith, um, and to mindset. So I feel like there's a real broad spectrum uh, perspective that I can help folks with in one-on-one conversations. That we'll see where it goes, but I'm pretty excited
Yeah.
about the opportunity.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think you could. I mean, you have a lot to offer. I mean, you have a long marriage, so that gives you that credential. That proof that you're someone to talk to about marriage. It's not like you've been divorced, let's say, 2 times. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
huh, do I really want to talk to a guy who's been divorced 2 times without knowing much about this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you raised 4 of them, and with 2 of them that we just talked about so far have a career that has been placed in their hearts, and that's, I'm sure, a lot of what you have done just
Yeah.
by being in
Yeah.
ministry, and being around it, and then feeling led to continue that part of you to live on.
Mhm.
So it
Yeah.
shows that you have your
Yeah.
family together, and
Mm.
as the major theme of this whole podcast has really just been putting family first.
Mhm. Yeah. That's so huge. That's so important. There really is no better foundation for society than a healthy family.
Right.
There isn't. Um, and
100%.
Yeah, one of the things that came to mind as you mentioned, my daughters again they're missionaries. When routines are hugely important for little kids, and bedtime routine in particular. And I remember one of the things that I don't remember where I got the idea, but there's a psalm that kind of pulls from the Levitical blessing. And
Okay.
I decided when the kids were really little that I was going to say that over them every night in a responsive way. So I would say the first part and they would say the second part. And it takes not even 30 seconds. So it's a blip in their day, but it became a blip in every one of their days for many years. And it went, I would say, the Lord bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine on you and give you grace, which is the Levitical blessing in the Old
Mhm.
Testament. And they would say that his ways may be known in the earth and his salvation to all nations, which is taken from one of the Psalms. I don't remember the number, but I would say that to them every night. And they would say it back without thinking, see how quick they could say it. And it was light, it wasn't
Right.
like get on your knees and close your eyes and it wasn't, we weren't heavy like that. But um, I remember when one of my daughters got married in Mexico to another missionary. I think that particular routine came up, and one of my girls said, "Well, what else would you expect when you said that to us every night? That his ways would be known in all the earth." Wow, wow, who would have thought? Just it's like a little drip of water every night, and here they are serving folks in Mexico. Building houses for folks who don't have the means, and hosting youth groups and teaching them how to serve the poor. It's pretty amazing, the long-term results of a simple routine. And certainly there's more to what brought
Oh, of
them to
course.
that than that, but um, that was a
Well,
little
that's
piece.
what's so cool about life, though. It's all about these like little variables, like these little things here
Mm,
and there,
hmm
and doing it
hmm
consistently that makes a profound impact. Again, that we see later in life, but we don't see it
mm,
right then.
yeah, yeah.
And that's why it's so awesome. Like when you just reflect on life and how where your life has come by. Because I know a lot of times people I talk to, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in
Mm,
like, how did I get my life here? Like, how did I screw
mm,
up so bad that I would end up here?
mm,
When my problems aren't always as bad as X, Y, and Z,
hmm
and it's kind of like, well, you're not going to pinpoint because life is full of every decisions we make. There might be
yeah.
like maybe like one or two major ones, sure, but life is full of decisions, and like you said in the podcast, that there are consequences, and are we aware of those consequences or not at the time
Yeah.
determines what's going to happen. And it's also
Yeah.
our response to what happens. Are you going to take the response to get better, be paralyzed by fear? And the person I'm
mm,
thinking of, it was more of a they were paralyzed.
yeah. Yeah. That's a good uh, that's a helpful way of looking at things, because there are, I mean, people get into tough situations,
Oh yeah,
and one of the heaviest burdens when you're in one of those situations is recognizing that I'm in this because of my own decisions. It's my fault, and that's. But if you can take ownership of that, that gives you footing to be able to make a change. It's like,
right.
but if you don't, you blame other people, then you're powerless to kind of change the tide, so to speak. Um, but sometimes it's big decisions, like you mentioned, but it's more often the smaller decisions that kind of add up.
Right.
And one of the things that having worked in hospice, and I also worked in uh, drug and alcohol detox for a period of time.
Oh, okay.
Um, One of the things that I think is oftentimes forgotten is the randomness of life. It's like
Mm.
sometimes it isn't your fault that you got this terminal disease, and there may have been nothing you could do to prevent that.
Very,
Um, it's one of those random variables that, uh, but if you can develop yourself into the kind of character that can learn to handle whatever comes your way for whatever reason it's coming your way, um, you're gonna now you're gonna weather those kinds of storms a lot better, um, and they might not sink your ship. Um,
right.
yeah,
So one of the biggest questions that I get a lot, and to answer this question is so tricky because in my position, I have to be so careful how to answer it. But a lot of times I would get like that. A lot of times people with they get a disease or they get, let's say, they get diagnosed with like anxiety or depression
hmm
or a
hmm
terminal disease. A lot of times people will say that they feel like God is punishing them. Like they must have done something so horrendous that God is now punishing them for whatever action or inaction that they chose. So kind of like in your role, have you ever faced that when someone just like looks at you dead in the eye and they feel like that God is like punishing them?
that is a tricky question, and I'm not dialing up a specific situation
Sure.
where someone has asked that exact question to me,
Mhm.
but um, but there certainly is that kind of a struggle for many folks when they're dealing with a terminal illness or something that has come to them seemingly from God.
Right.
Um, and there's like if you dig down into that theologically, there's the reality that God doesn't necessarily cause those things. God may allow those things, which and there's a distinction there that's
Oh, I
worthy to be made.
100%.
Um, but when you're the brunt of something taking you out, uh, that's not comforting. Um,
Not at all. No.
um, and and I what I can say,
Mhm.
sitting with folks who are struggling with that kind of thing, is that sometimes the answer is not the answer. It's like that's a question that I don't have an answer for,
Mm. Yeah.
and and it's very possible that you may not get an answer to it either. It
Right.
may be an unanswered question.
Which
And
I mean, I agree. I mean, that's one of the hardest things because obviously we're not God and we don't know how
mhm,
he thinks or anything like that. Especially when someone's suffering too, and they just feel
yeah,
like they're getting beat against the wall. And they get knocked down, and no matter how many times they get up, they just feel like they're always getting knocked down. It's just like, when will this end?
yeah,
Not
and
necessarily
it's
wanting to hurt themselves, or in some cases, yes, but
mhm,
it's more like, when's this pain just gonna stop?
right, right, and I feel like most of the time the most helpful approach when you actually don't have the power to change the situation, um, is not to sugarcoat it or whitewash it
Right.
or leave.
Mm.
But it's like that's your problem, not mine. So uh, the what the most helpful thing that you can do is be present.
Amen. 100%.
Is is it's like I don't have an answer, but I'm here. You know, I don't have anything that I think will say will help, but I'm here. Um, that that makes a difference for folks.
Yeah, because it prevents you from being judgmental because you don't know the
Mhm,
person's situation.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
that way it prevents you from looking at, let's say, all the scripture and say, well, God says
Mm,
you can't be tempted by evil. It says God doesn't cause evil. I mean, like we said, there's a difference between allowing something and causing something. It's a huge
Yep.
difference.
Yep.
And in my life and everything I've come to learn and through lots of mistakes is 95% of people just want to be listened to. They just want to see
Hmm.
if you're gonna care, and yes, they might say things to see if they see your reaction, things like that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they just want to see if you're just gonna be like a human. And I say just being, like you said, being present, being mindful of that the
Yeah.
person's going through so much pain. Like, listen, you've been beat, you've been hurt. It's okay to ask those kind of questions.
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
be careful because sometimes you get an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I think another thing that's kind of a lesson I've learned working in hospice is, um, there are questions that don't have answers.
right.
And but what do you do with that? It's like you can wrestle with a question, and sometimes there's benefit in wrestling with the questions.
Hmm.
Um, but I also think there's more benefit on the other side of the unanswered question in opening up to mystery.
Hmm.
It's like
Yeah.
there, as much as we can know as an individual or as human beings, uh, you in the broad scope of what there is that can be known, we really know nothing. It's like that. Uh,
Yeah. It's
it's
very
like
true.
looking up. It's like looking up at the sky at night.
Right.
A dark night where the stars are all out. There's something that you can sense that isn't. It almost, it's almost irreverent to try to put words to it. There's an awe. There's a wonder. There's
Yes.
a mystery, and there are some things that can bring you to the precipice of that. Looking at the stars at night, uh, uh, certain encounters with individuals, and I think end of life and suffering can do that too.
Yeah.
Um, I think for me, working in hospice, that's one of my biggest takeaways is um, the value of mystery and
I like that.
encountering that.
I like that perspective. It's because it's not necessarily pessimistic. It's quite optimistic because it's always searching for that meaning, searching for an
Hmm.
understanding.
Hmm.
And sometimes, and this is kind of going to the why, is sometimes trying to find purpose in the pain. Sometimes people are okay with pain, but a lot of times people like to have like a purpose that there's a reason for this pain. And I've seen people who've gotten diseases and they've connected with other people, and they would never have
Yeah,
formed that connection if someone didn't get sick.
yeah,
As unfortunate as it may be, but then they bought, at least now you're not alone in suffering this. And that's also the biggest relief, knowing people are not alone and having those thoughts.
hmm, hmm,
So,
yeah, for sure, for sure, yeah, yeah,
I love the way these the conversation went to getting really deep. That's just
hmm,
amazing how conversations just can work and transform. And so
yeah.
as
There,
we
I
kind
had
of wrap up, oh,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I had I had a thought. I think I may have tweeted this at some point.
Mhm.
There's kind of thinking about this idea of mystery and the transcendent, and there's a capacity to know that we have as human beings that is, it's an appetite. We want to know stuff. We want to know why. We want to know what's out there. We want to know why things happen. Um, some of those answers to those why questions are bigger than we have the capacity to understand. It's like
Right.
one of the things that makes God God is the fact that he's beyond our full human comprehension. If
Yeah,
if we could fully understand him, he wouldn't be God. Um,
it's a very good point.
and I had the thought, kind of pondering on this, that there's the old bumper stickers, Jesus is the answer, and and I don't disparage that at all, but what if instead of pushing Jesus as the answer, we push Jesus as the question?
Oh, so kind of flipping a little bit.
Yeah, it's like Jesus asked questions all the time.
Right.
He was not dogmatic about who he was, and uh, working in hospice and being a person of faith, there is a sense at times, that you're on holy ground, and
Mhm.
when someone takes their last breath, that really is a holy moment. And what's on the other side? I have my beliefs, but I don't know. I don't know what's on the
Right.
other side. And a lot of what my beliefs are in this life, I believe things, but I don't know. So there's that. It kind of it takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, being a person of faith to trust that God's got stuff where I can't figure it out. And thinking about Jesus in terms of being a question, because a question affects people different than an answer.
I like that. Because the
If I
question
give
will
you,
make you go search and inquire and ask questions, which leads to more questions.
yeah, when you get an answer, there's a satisfaction, and you kind of close the book. So I have my
Exactly.
answer,
Yeah.
and
So
and I and I don't. If someone encounters Jesus as the answer and closes the book, you're doing it wrong, because
hmm,
I think his an encounter with Jesus is much more like a question. And if you read Scripture, the disciples and the folks in the New Testament who encountered Jesus, it was much more like they were encountering something that evoked something in them further.
right.
And yeah, but
I like that. I like that a lot because that kind of keeps that, like when you look up in the night sky as you were talking about, that awe. It's like always wanting to know more and discovering more, and not
right,
just being okay. Yep, cool, look good, got it.
yeah,
It keeps the
exactly,
book open. I like that.
yeah,
I've never heard someone put it that way before. I really like that approach versus, it's a question, and you go to the source for questions and then
hmm
commentaries and different podcasts and different pastors and different ideas just to continue to learn more and grow because everyone has their own different teaching styles.
right, yep, yep, yeah,
So
good,
as we
yeah.
wrap up, and definitely enjoyed your time here, what is like a lasting comment? Like what's like a lasting kind of statement that you want to leave everyone with here today?
Um, yeah, find opportunities to embrace mystery. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, because they are all around if your eyes are open to see it. Um, yeah, find opportunities to embrace mystery, and I think it begins with noticing, and just and yeah,
you gotta claim that quote. You gotta find out how you ever like claim quotes and make it because it's that's a very elegant quote. So I like it a lot because that way, who doesn't love a good mystery and a good sense of
yeah,
adventure? And that's what life
yeah,
is. It's a it's it's a whole storybook of happiness, joy, sadness,
hmm
anger,
hmm
bitterness,
yeah,
and all the rays of emotions and the wonder and the adventure. So you guys
yeah,
heard it well. Keep the mystery alive, keep asking questions, keep seeking opportunities, continue your path and being a man of action. And remember, in today's man of action, put your family first. And do not lose your sense of adventure, for the mystery is alive, just waiting for it to be unfolded. But you must seek that opportunity. This has been a great podcast. Again, thank you, Steve, for coming on. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
thanks, Zach.